And let's finish Eyes That See the Wind from the Golden Harp from the Grey King. When we finish this chapter, we will be at the halfway point of the narrative. So Bran and Will have gone through the trial and received the Golden Harp for the Light, which Bran is the only one that can play. We wonder who the two other lords in the room with the test were. One was from the dark, one sat in the middle. There was something about him. I will give you a hint. His name was mentioned in the last chapter, and it was not one of the names that I could not pronounce correctly. Big hint. But let's pick up. They're going down the mountain. Every time Bran stops playing the harp, the Grey King attacks them using the Wind of the Dead. And Will, up on the empty rock under the grey, drizzling sky, was instantly filled with a presentiment of disaster so overpowering that without thought he reached out and seized the Golden Harp and cried to Bran, "Stop, Caffel! Stop him! Stop him!" Bran gave him one frightened look, then he flung himself after Caffel, running, stumbling, desperately calling the dog back. Scrambling down from the rock with the harp under one arm, Will saw his white head moving fast over the nearest field, and beyond it, a blur of speed that he knew was Caffel pursuing the grey fox. His head dizzy with foreboding, he too ran. Still, on high land, he could see 2 fields away the roofs of Caradog Pritchard's farm, and nearby a grey-white knot of sheep and the figures of men. He skidded to a halt suddenly. The harp! If there was no means of explaining the harp, if anyone should see it, he was certain to be among men in a few moments. The harp must be hidden, but where? He looked wildly about him. The fire had not touched this field. On the far side of the field he saw a small lean-to, no more than 3 stone walls and a slate roof. That was an open shelter for sheep in winter, or a store place for winter feed. It was filled with bales of hay, already newly stacked. Running to it, Will thrust the gleaming little harp between 2 bales of hay so that it was completely invisible from the outside. Then, standing back, he stretched out one hand, and in the old speech, put upon the harp the spell of Caradog, by the power of which only the song of an old one would be able to take the harp out of that place, or even make it visible at all. Then he rushed away over the field toward Pritchard's farm, where distant shouts marked the ending of the chase. He could see in a meadow beyond the farm buildings the huge grey fox, swerving and leaping in an effort to shake Caffel from his heels, and Caffel running doggedly close. A madness seemed to be in the fox. White foam dripped from its jaws. Will stumbled breathless into the farmyard to find Bran struggling to make his way through a group of men and sheep. At the gate, John Rowlands was there, and Owen Davies, with Will's uncle. Their clothes and weary faces were still blackened with ash from the firefighting, and Caradog Pritchard stood there scowling with his gun cocked under his arm. "That damned dog has gone mad!" Pritchard growled. "Careful! Careful!" Bran pushed his way wildly through into the field, scattering the sheep. Paying no heed to anyone, Pritchard snarled at him, and Owen Davies said sharply, "Bran, where have you been? What are you up to?" The grey fox leapt high in the air, as they had seen it do once before on Bird Rock. Caffel leapt after it, snapping at it in mid-air. "The dog is mad," David Evans said unhappily. "He will be on the sheep." He's just so determined to get that fox." Bran's voice was high with anguish. "Caffel! Daddy, Ma! Leave it!" Will's uncle looked at Bran as if he could not believe what he had heard. Then he looked down at Will. He said, puzzled, "What fox?" Horror exploded in Will's brain, as suddenly he understood, and he cried out, but it was too late. The grey fox in the field swung about and came leaping straight at them, with Caffel at his heels. At the last moment it curved sideways and leapt at one of the sheep that now milled terrified round the gate and sank its teeth into its woolly throat. The sheep screamed. Caffel sprang at the fox. 20 yards away, Caradog Pritchard let out a great furious shout, lifted his gun, and shot Caffel full in the chest. "Caffel!" Bran's cry of loving horror struck at Will so that for a second he closed his eyes in pain. He knew that the grief in it would ring in his ears forever. The grey fox stood waiting for Will to look at it, grinning, red tongue lolling, with a mouth dripping brighter with red blood. It stared straight at him with an unmistakable sneering snarl. Then it loped off across the field, straight as an arrow, and disappeared over the far hedge. Bran was on his knees by the dog, sobbing, cradling the white head on his lap. He called desperately to Caffel, fondling his ears, dropping his cheek just once, and longing to rest against the smooth neck. But there was nothing to be done. The chest was a shattered ruin. The silver eyes were glazed, unblinking. Caffel was dead. "Murdering bloody dog!" Pritchard was babbling with fury still, in a kind of savage contentment. "He'll kill no more of my sheep. A damn good riddance." "He was just after the fox. He was trying to save your old sheep." Bran choked on his words and wept. "What are you talking about? A fox? Damn, old boy! You are as mad as the dog." Pritchard broke the shell out of his gun, his pudgy face contemptuous. Owen Davies was down on his knees beside Bran. "Come, Bagton," he said, his voice gentle. "There was no fox anywhere. Caffel was going for the sheep, there is no question. We all saw. He was a lovely dog, a beauty." His voice shook and he cleared his throat. "But he must have gone bad in his head. I cannot say that I would not have shot him myself in Caradog's place. That is the right of it. Once a dog turns killer, it is the only thing to do." His arm was tight round Bran's shoulders. Bran looked up at the rest of them, blindly tugging off his glasses and rubbing a hand over his eyes. He said, high incredulous, "But did none of you see the fox? The big grey fox that Caffel jumped at as it went to kill the sheep?" John Rowland said, his voice deep and compassionate. "No, Bran." "There was no fox, Bran," David Evans said. "I'm sorry, boybuck. Come on now. Let your father take you to Clwyd. We'll bring Caffel after you." "Ah!" said Pritchard with a sniff. "You can get that carrion out of my yard as soon as you like, yes, and pay the vet's bill when I have that sheep seen to as well." "Cade again, Caradog, Pritchard," said Will's uncle sharply. "There will be talk of this sheep attacking business later. You can have a little feeling for the boy, surely." Caradog Pritchard looked at him, his small eyes bright and expressionless. He motioned to one of his men to take the wounded sheep away. Then he spat casually on the ground and walked off to his farmhouse. A woman was standing there in the doorway. She had not moved through everything that had happened. Bran's father helped him to his feet and led him away. Bran seemed dazed. He looked at Will blankly, as if he had not been there. David Evans said glumly, "Wait a minute. There is some sacking in the car. I will come and find it." John Rowland stood beside Will in the fine rain, sucking at an empty pipe, looking reflectively down at the still white body with the dreadful red gash in its chest. He said, "And did you see this fox, Will Stanton?" "Yes," Will said, "of course. It was in front of us, as clear as you are now. It had tried to attack us on Bird Rock, and Caffel chased it down here, but none of you could see it, so nobody will ever believe us, will they?" John Rowlands was silent for a moment. Then, his creased brow unreadable, then he said, "Sometimes in these mountains there are things it is very hard to believe, even when you have seen them with your own eyes. For instance, there is Caffel, and with our eyes we saw him alone jump at that sheep. And indeed something did sink its teeth into the sheep's throat, and must have got a bloody mouth doing it, for there was blood all over the sheep's fleece. And it is lucky to be alive, and yet it is a strange thing, which will not go out of my mind, that although poor Caffel lies there with his own blood all over his broken chest, there is no blood on his mouth at all." And that is the end of The Eyes That See the Wind, and it is also the end of the Golden Harp.